I'm Chelsea Rose, a historical archaeologist at Southern Oregon University, and I'm back at the Oregon Historical Society for another edition of Unearthing Oregon History.
Way out west in Oregon in 1923, the DeAutremont brothers.
Today we're going to be talking about Tunnel 13 and what's been called the last Great American Train Robbery. We're going to tell you a little bit about the story, but we're really going to be focusing about all the firsts associated with this case. In October 11th of 1923, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary this year, three brothers, Hugh, Ray, and Roy DeAutremont, attempted to rob Train 13 on the Southern Pacific at Tunnel 13, which is in the Siskiyou Mountains. And this tunnel might be familiar to some of you who have watched our earlier videos talking about the Buckrock Tunnel. That tunnel was abandoned and never completed, and this is the one that took its place. The three brothers climbed on the train right before it went into Tunnel 13 in the Siskiyou Tunnel, it's called, to go over the pass into California. The train was heading to San Francisco. So they hopped on as the train slowed down, and they went to engineer Sidney Bates and asked him to stop the train as it entered the tunnel. And then things went south from there. They took some dynamite and they attempted to blow off the mail car door, but they way overestimated the amount of dynamite that they needed, and they actually blew the mail car to smithereens, including, unfortunately, the postal clerk himself. Postal clerk Elvin Doherty, brakeman Charles Orrin Johnson, engineer Sidney Bates, and fireman Marvin Singh all died at the scene. What ensued would become an international manhunt. Over 2 million wanted flyers were printed, and they were sent all over the world. Postal inspectors were on the scene while people were continuing to look for the three brothers, and they collected all this evidence. So there was overalls, a pistol, the detonator box, along with spent shell casings and things like that. They found all this evidence, and somebody had the bright idea to send it down to a professor at UC Berkeley, a chemistry professor. And he went on to basically use forensic science that was widely being used in Europe at the time but hadn't made it over to the US yet. So he looked at blood residue, these overalls that they found. He found pitch and hair, and deep inside a pencil pocket, he found like a money order receipt. So from there, they were like, okay, we think we know who these folks are. The chemistry professor, Edward Oscar Heinrich, he actually said, I think that one of them was a logger at a spruce or pine lumber camp, and he's this tall and he weighs this much and he's left-handed, and he was able to say all these different things based on this evidence. And this kind of forensic science was really new to all these folks, and it led to the establishment of the first forensics lab, crime lab in the US in LA later that year. So it was really influential for the landscape of crime scene investigation that we have today. So the youngest brother, Hugh, was captured in the Philippines. He was enrolled in the US Army under a different name, and one of his officers recognized him from one of the 2 million wanted posters that were spread around the world. The other two brothers were captured in 1927. They had been living in Ohio as farmers, and they were living together under assumed names. The brothers are eventually paroled. In 1961, Ray DeAutremont is paroled, and in 1972, Tom McCall actually commutes his sentence for good behavior and uses him as an example of a reformed criminal. The object we're going to be talking about today is one of the paintings that Ray did while he was at the Oregon State Penitentiary in 1956. And one of the things I think it's really interesting about this object is that it's a mountain scene. And when you look at it, I don't know that it's possible to tell exactly what mountain it is, but it's pretty reminiscent of the Siskiyou Mountains where the train robbery actually took place. We have a snow-capped peak, and we have fall colors even. So in October, there would have been some fall colors, and the painting is called Solitude, Silence, and Mountains. As we work towards the 100th anniversary, there's a lot to reflect on this, not only in all the different firsts that this case represents, but kind of this moment in time where you're, kind of the Wild West is transitioning to the modern world that we live in today. And you can really see that at the juxtaposition of a train robbery and a sophisticated forensic science crime scene analysis, which is happening on the other side. So over 50 years after the robbery itself, Ray DeAutremont visited the scene of the crime. When he reflected back on that time of his life, he did that with a lot of regret I think a lot of what's been lost is the story of the 4 men whose lives were lost that day. And it's important to keep that in mind and not to let this story be kind of hijacked by the way that it so easily fits into what we want to think about as this Western fantasy past of train robberies and gold on trains. And, the Siskiyou Mountains are such, as seen here, a scenic backdrop for that moment in the American West. And a lot of the way in which that has been packaged and sold to people since the 19th century as a place of vast, open, beautiful wilderness where the people and their misdeeds are often erased from the scenery, the violence that's hidden, and a lot of the ways in which it's a really ugly part of history that takes place even in the most beautiful of backdrops.
Way out west in Oregon in 1923, the DeAutremont brothers wrecked the train as brutal as could be.